Right now, the most mysterious object ever to enter our solar system is less than 8 million miles from Earth and closing fast. That's roughly 30 times the distance to the Moon, a cosmic blink of an eye. And NASA has gone completely silent. 3 weeks ago, the space agency was providing daily updates on 3I/ATLAS, the interstellar visitor that's been defying physics since the moment we discovered it. Press conferences, data releases, expert interviews, then, without warning, everything stopped. The public briefings were cancelled, the live telescope feeds went dark, and suddenly every NASA official is repeating the same phrase, "No comment at this time." But here's what they're not telling you. Military satellites have been repositioned to track ATLAS around the clock. Emergency protocols normally reserved for incoming nuclear threats have been quietly activated, and restricted airspace zones have appeared over major cities with no official explanation. The thing nobody tells you is that when a government agency that loves publicity suddenly goes silent, it's not because there's nothing to report, it's because what they've discovered is too alarming to share. Something has changed about 3I/ATLAS, something that has turned scientific curiosity into classified emergency response. And we have less than 3 weeks to figure out what NASA knows that they're not telling us. For months, NASA's approach to 3I/ATLAS was unprecedented transparency. A senior scientist from the Jet Propulsion Laboratory was holding weekly press briefings. The James Webb Space Telescope data was being released to the public within hours of collection. Amateur astronomers worldwide were encouraged to track the object and share observations. Then everything changed. A senior astronomer who worked on the ATLAS observation program described the shift. We were scheduled for our regular Thursday briefing. 30 minutes before it started, we received orders from NASA headquarters to cancel. Not postpone, cancel permanently. Within 2 hours, all our external communications were classified. We were told that any discussion of ATLAS outside secure channels could result in termination and potential criminal charges. The official explanation was bureaucratic nonsense about data verification procedures and coordination with international partners. But scientists who've worked with NASA for decades say they've never seen this kind of abrupt shutdown before. Even more suspicious, the communications blackout extended beyond NASA. The European Space Agency stopped publishing Atlas data. China's space program, which had been competing to release findings first, went completely silent. Russia's Roscosmos deleted previous announcements from their official channels. When rival space agencies that normally compete for prestige suddenly coordinate a simultaneous communications blackout, something has unified them. And that something is terrifying enough to overcome decades of geopolitical rivalry. A former NASA administrator, speaking anonymously, described the protocol. There are only 3 scenarios where we implement total communications blackout across international space agencies: imminent collision threat with insufficient time for evacuation, detection of hostile military technology, or confirmation of extraterrestrial intelligence. Those are the only things that justify this level of secrecy. Public records show that NASA requested emergency funding authorization from congressional oversight committees. The dollar amount is classified, but budget analysts estimate it's somewhere between $15 and $40 billion. Funding that requires no public justification and can be spent with minimal oversight. Before the blackout, the final publicly released data from ATLAS showed measurements that scientists are still struggling to explain. And reviewing those last reports reveals why NASA might have decided that further transparency was too dangerous. The object's trajectory had changed, not dramatically, but measurably. Atlas was moving on a hyperbolic path that should have taken it past Earth and back out into interstellar space. But trajectory calculations showed it was gradually curving inward, bleeding velocity in ways that suggested deliberate course correction rather than gravitational influence. A JPL orbital mechanics specialist described the anomaly in the final public briefing. The velocity changes we're observing require either continuous thrust over several weeks or gravitational assists from objects that don't exist. neither explanation fits with our understanding of natural phenomena. The electromagnetic emissions also intensified. Throughout its approach, ATLAS had been broadcasting those mysterious mathematical signals. But in the final week before the blackout, the signal strength increased by a factor of 300. The broadcasts went from something requiring sensitive radio telescopes to detect to emissions powerful enough to interfere with commercial satellite communications. Cell phone networks in parts of North America and Europe experienced unexplained disruptions during specific time windows that precisely matched when ATLAS was in direct line of sight overhead. Then there were the visual observations that amateur astronomers captured before being asked to stop sharing their findings. Multiple independent observers reported seeing what appeared to be structured lights on the object's surface, not random reflections from ice crystals, patterns that repeated in regular intervals and geometric arrangements. One amateur astronomer in Chile captured video showing what appeared to be a grid of lights activating across Atlas's surface, remaining visible for 47 minutes before dimming. The video was shared on social media, gained millions of views, and was then removed at the request of government agencies, citing national security concerns. The final public statement from NASA came from a deputy administrator during a hastily arranged press conference. We want to assure the public that 3I/ATLAS presents no immediate danger to Earth. Ongoing observations will continue through appropriate channels. Further updates will be provided as information becomes available. Every word of that statement was carefully chosen by lawyers, and what it doesn't say is far more revealing than what it does. While NASA went silent, the military went into high gear, and the scope of the mobilization suggests preparation for scenarios far beyond scientific curiosity. Space Force assets that officially don't exist have been activated. Satellite tracking networks normally used for monitoring ballistic missiles have been redirected to maintain constant observation of ATLAS, and classified orbital platforms, the ones that defense officials refuse to confirm or deny, have maneuvered into positions that provide optimal viewing angles, but the mobilization extends far beyond space assets. NORAD increased its alert status to levels not seen since the Cold War. Nuclear command and control aircraft, the flying command posts designed to maintain government continuity during nuclear war, have been conducting round-the-clock flights over specific regions. A former Air Force officer with knowledge of strategic defense protocols described what they're seeing. The mobilization pattern matches our response plans for a specific scenario: detection of an unknown object with potential hostile capabilities approaching Earth with insufficient time for diplomatic engagement. We're not preparing for a scientific mission. We're preparing for first contact under threat conditions. Restricted airspace zones have appeared over major metropolitan areas worldwide. The official explanation involves military exercises and aviation safety protocols. But flight tracking data shows these zones are positioned along trajectory paths where ATLAS will have direct line of sight during its closest approach. Underground command facilities have been activated. Cheyenne Mountain, America's nuclear command center buried inside a Colorado mountain, has increased staffing levels by 400%. Similar facilities in Russia, China, and NATO countries show increased activity patterns consistent with crisis management operations. Even more concerning, emergency supplies have been quietly moved into position. FEMA has pre-positioned disaster response equipment across multiple regions. Medical supplies, water purification systems, emergency communication networks, all staged in a pattern that suggests preparation for widespread infrastructure disruption. A Homeland Security analyst described the logistics. What we're seeing is mobilization for mass casualty scenarios combined with potential communications blackouts. They're not preparing for a single disaster event. They're preparing for cascading failures across multiple systems simultaneously. The National Guard has been placed on standby in 37 states under the cover of routine readiness drills, but the drill parameters include scenarios involving civil unrest, infrastructure collapse, and non-standard threat response, military terminology that typically refers to threats that don't fit conventional warfare categories. This isn't the first time government agencies have gone silent about something in space. And examining those previous incidents reveals a disturbing pattern about what triggers communications blackouts. In the 1990s, military satellites detected an unusual object in high Earth orbit. For 3 weeks, tracking data was collected and analyzed. Then, abruptly, all information about the object was classified. To this day, the official position is that the object was space debris from a Soviet satellite. But declassified documents reveal that the object performed multiple course corrections, something debris cannot do. A former NSA analyst who worked on that incident described the response: "We detected something artificial in orbit that wasn't ours and wasn't from any known space program. The decision was made that public disclosure would create more problems than it solved. So we classified everything and developed cover stories about satellite debris." More recently, there was the case of an object that approached the International Space Station closer than safety protocols allowed. Astronauts reported seeing what appeared to be a metallic sphere maintaining position relative to the station for several hours. NASA's official statement called it a weather balloon, despite weather balloons not existing at that altitude and not having the propulsion to maintain orbital velocity. The thing nobody tells you is that space agencies have protocols for exactly this situation: unknown objects exhibiting intelligent behavior. Those protocols prioritize information control over public transparency, specifically to prevent panic and maintain social order while responses are developed. A congressional staffer who attended classified briefings on space threats described the government's approach. There's a fundamental assumption that the public cannot handle certain truths about what's out there. Whether that assumption is correct or not, it drives decision-making at the highest levels. When something appears that challenges our understanding of reality, the default response is silence until we understand what we're dealing with. The pattern is clear: transparency during normal operations, immediate classification during anomalies. And the more anomalous the situation, the tighter the information control becomes. With 3I/ATLAS, we've gone from unprecedented openness to complete blackout in less than 72 hours. That suggests what they've discovered falls into the category of reality-challenging anomalies that trigger maximum secrecy protocols. Despite the official blackout, amateur astronomers and independent researchers continue to track ATLAS, and what they're observing suggests that whatever caused NASA's silence is still developing. Observatory networks outside government control have documented continued trajectory changes. Atlas is no longer following a simple hyperbolic path. Instead, it's executing what astronomers describe as spiral approach maneuvers, gradually decreasing its distance from Earth while maintaining specific geometric relationships to the planet's position. A university astronomer operating independently described the pattern: "The trajectory looks deliberate. It's not the path of an object being captured by gravity. It's the approach pattern of something that's navigating toward a specific destination." The electromagnetic broadcasts have evolved. Instead of simple mathematical sequences, recent signals include what appear to be image data, pixelated patterns that might represent visual information encoded in radio transmissions. Several independent research teams have attempted to decode these patterns with results that have been both fascinating and disturbing. One decoding attempt produced what appears to be a star map, not of our night sky, but of stellar positions from a different perspective, possibly the view from another star system. If accurate, this would represent proof that ATLAS originated from a specific location in space and is capable of recording and transmitting complex navigational information. Another decoded sequence appears to show Earth itself, continents, oceans, and even what might be city lights on the night side. The resolution isn't perfect, but the image is clear enough to be recognizable. Something is mapping our planet and broadcasting those maps, either back to a point of origin or to other objects in the solar system. The visual observations have become more dramatic. Multiple amateur astronomers report seeing Atlas eject smaller objects, dozens of them over the past 2 weeks. These objects spread out from the main body and take up positions that form a geometric pattern around it. One observer in Australia captured video showing 7 small objects arranged in a perfect heptagon around Atlas, all maintaining exact distances while the formation rotates. The video has been shared through encrypted channels after previous public uploads were removed. Ground-based radar systems operated by universities have detected something even more unusual. Atlas appears to have a rotating section. Part of its structure is spinning at a rate that creates artificial gravity equivalent to Earth's surface gravity. Natural objects don't have rotating sections that create precisely 1 g of centrifugal force. A mechanical engineer analyzing the radar data explained the significance. That rotation rate isn't random. It's precisely calculated to create Earth normal gravity. That's either the most unlikely coincidence in astrophysics, or it's a designed habitat meant for beings that evolved under 1 g conditions, like us. Atlas's closest approach to Earth is now estimated at less than 3 weeks away, and recent observations suggest that approach might be the wrong word. It increasingly looks like arrival. Current trajectory models predict Atlas will slow to a relative stop at approximately 500,000 miles from Earth, slightly more than twice the distance to the Moon. That's close enough for detailed observation of our planet, but far enough to remain outside our effective defensive capabilities. A military space surveillance analyst described the tactical implications. That distance is perfect for observation while remaining outside the range of most Earth-based weapons. It's exactly where you'd position a reconnaissance platform if you wanted to study Earth while maintaining a safety buffer. The timing is also significant. Atlas's arrival coincides with a rare alignment of several factors: a new moon providing maximum darkness for observation, minimal solar activity that would interfere with electromagnetic communications, and orbital positions that place major spacefaring nations' satellites in disadvantageous positions for defensive action. Whether these coincidences represent careful planning or incredible luck depends on whether you believe ATLAS is intelligent. But the statistical probability of all these factors aligning naturally is roughly 1 in several million. Recent electromagnetic emissions suggest preparation for something. The broadcast patterns have shifted from continuous transmission to burst communications, short, powerful transmissions followed by periods of silence. Military communications analysts recognize this pattern as common practice before major operations, establishing protocols, confirming readiness, and minimizing detection during final approach. Independent observers have also noticed increased activity from those smaller objects ejected from ATLAS. They're repositioning themselves into what looks suspiciously like a sensor network or communication relay system. Each object maintains sightlines to ATLAS, to Earth, and to several other objects, creating an interconnected grid. A communications engineer analyzing the network structure explained, "This is classical relay architecture. You'd build exactly this kind of network if you wanted to maintain constant communication across a large area while ensuring redundancy if individual nodes fail. It's intelligent design, not random positioning." The heat signatures from ATLAS have also changed. Instead of the relatively uniform temperature you'd expect from an inert object, thermal imaging shows concentrated heat sources at specific points, engines possibly, or power generation systems activating in preparation for whatever comes next. While official agencies remain silent, leaked information and anonymous sources paint a picture of frantic activity behind classified doors. And what's happening suggests that governments are preparing for multiple scenarios, not all of them peaceful. Emergency sessions of the UN Security Council have been convened under confidential protocols normally reserved for imminent warfare. Representatives from spacefaring nations have attended, along with military commanders and intelligence directors who don't typically participate in diplomatic proceedings. A diplomatic source described the atmosphere. "Nobody's saying it directly, but everyone in that room knows we're potentially facing first contact." The debates aren't about whether ATLAS is artificial. That seems to be accepted. The debates are about response protocols. Do we attempt communication? Do we maintain defensive posture? Do we prepare evacuation plans for coastal cities in case it's hostile? Intelligence agencies have been tasked with preparing threat assessments, not just about Atlas itself, but about potential social response if the truth becomes public. Psychological operations experts have been gaming out scenarios ranging from mass panic to religious upheaval to complete societal breakdown. A former intelligence analyst described the planning, "The agencies are more worried about human response than alien threat. History shows that paradigm-shifting revelations can destabilize societies. The concern is that if we announce aliens are real and one is parking in orbit next week, the resulting chaos could be more dangerous than the aliens themselves. Some nations are preparing unilateral action. Intelligence reports suggest that at least 3 countries have discussed the possibility of attempting to destroy or disable Atlas if it's determined to be hostile. The problem is that any such action could provoke exactly the response we're trying to prevent, or worse, it could destroy something that came in peace." Military planners are also preparing for the opposite scenario. What if ATLAS is a refugee ship? What if some catastrophe in its home system forced evacuation, and Earth represents the nearest habitable zone? That scenario raises entirely different questions about resources, territory, and whether we're ethically obligated to help. Behind all the planning is a fundamental question that nobody can answer. What are ATLAS's intentions? Without communication, without understanding, we're preparing for everything while hoping we're ready for anything. The thing nobody tells you is that first contact scenarios have been wargamed for decades. Every spacefaring nation has protocols, response plans, and decision trees for exactly this situation. But all those plans assumed we'd have warning, time to prepare, and some basis for understanding what we're dealing with. Instead, we have 3 weeks, minimal information, and an object that defies every attempt at classification. As frustrating as NASA's silence is, there are legitimate arguments for why transparency might be more dangerous than secrecy. Understanding those arguments helps us grapple with the impossible choices facing decision-makers. Information control during unprecedented events has historical precedent. During the Cuban Missile Crisis, the public wasn't informed about how close we came to nuclear war until after the crisis was resolved. That secrecy allowed negotiations to proceed without public pressure forcing hasty decisions. A crisis management specialist explained the logic. When you're facing an unknown threat with potentially civilization-ending consequences, premature disclosure can remove flexibility. If the public knows and demands action, politicians can't afford to appear weak or indecisive. That pressure can force confrontation when patience might be the better strategy. There's also the problem of panic and social disruption. Studies of human behavior during catastrophic events show that even well-prepared populations can become irrational when facing existential threats they don't understand. Mass evacuations could cause more deaths than the threat itself. Financial markets could collapse based on fear rather than actual danger. Religious and philosophical implications add another layer of complexity. For billions of people worldwide, their entire understanding of humanity's place in the universe is tied to religious frameworks. Confirmation of alien intelligence could trigger theological crises, sectarian conflict, and potential violence between groups with different interpretations of what it means. A sociologist studying crisis response described the dilemma. NASA isn't just deciding whether to tell people about an alien object, they're deciding whether to potentially shatter fundamental belief systems, destabilize global markets, and risk widespread panic, all while still not knowing if the threat is real. That's an impossible choice. There's also the military calculus. If Atlas represents superior technology, revealing its existence could trigger an arms race or hostile action from nations fearing they'll fall behind technologically. The chaos of competing claims and conspiracy theories could be more dangerous than the object itself. But perhaps the strongest argument for silence is this. What if they're wrong? What if further analysis reveals Atlas is natural after all, just extremely unusual? The damage from premature disclosure, panic, economic disruption, social upheaval, can't be undone if it turns out to be a false alarm. A former NASA administrator summarized the impossible position. We're damned if we speak and damned if we don't. Tell people and risk panic based on incomplete information. Stay silent and face accusations of cover-up if things go wrong. There's no good option, only least bad choices. 3 weeks from now, we'll know. Either Atlas will pass by harmlessly, and this will become a historical footnote about government overreaction, or humanity will face the most significant moment in our history. The silence from NASA and other space agencies tells us they believe something extraordinary is happening. The military mobilization tells us they're preparing for threats. The emergency protocols tell us they consider the situation serious enough to warrant extreme measures. But here's what we know for certain. An object from another star system is approaching Earth with properties that suggest intelligence. It's maneuvering, broadcasting, and preparing for something. And every government on the planet is treating it as the most significant event of our time while refusing to tell the public what they've learned. A Harvard astrophysicist who has been tracking the situation from the beginning offered this assessment. NASA's silence is the loudest signal we could receive. If this were truly nothing to worry about, they'd be holding press conferences to reassure the public. The fact that they've gone dark means they've discovered something that changes the calculation. Whether that's a threat, an opportunity, or simply something beyond our understanding, we're about to find out.